big district. He was elected the Majority Whip of the Senate Majority Caucus in 2014, and he currently serves as Vice Chair of the Transportation Committee, and will serve this year as the Secretary of Appropriations Committee. Additionally, he serves on the Finance and Regulated Industries and Utilities Committees, and as ex officio on the Rules Committee. So as you can tell, he's the man we all need to know. He did graduate from North Georgia College and State University with a bachelor's in business administration and a master's degree in public administration. And he currently serves as the executive director of the Development Authority for Lumpkin County. So he understands all that we're due here at the Chamber. So I have Kevin Tanner. Kevin is currently serving in his third term as the state rep for District 9, including Lumpkin and parts of Dawson and Forsyth counties. He currently serves as the chairman of House Transportation Committee and is a member of several other committees in the House, including Appropriations, Education, Special Rules, Natural Resources, and the Intergovernmental Coordination Committee. He also serves as the chair of the House Transit Funding and Governance Committee and has served on several special study committees, including chair of the House Unmanned Aircraft Study Committee, which I think we would all call drones. Again, you can see with who we are represented by. Transportation, they've got it down right here. I think this is Transportation Brain Trust for the entire state right here with us. Kevin is also a small business owner. He owns a security company where he provides armed and unarmed security guard services to various clients. He also owns Tanco Investments, a company with residential and commercial rental property in several counties in North Georgia. And I know that both of them really could speak without any introduction because they are great examples of what local elected officials should be involved. I think we probably see them more than their own families see them, but we really appreciate that here at the Chamber. And first, what we're going to do is allow them to speak for a few minutes, give us some updates about what went on this session, and then we'll ask a few questions about what is happening, what has happened, what might happen with the legislature in regards to specific issues, here in Dawson County. So we will kick it off. Kevin, whoever wants to speak first, I'll let y'all flip for it. You want to come on up here? Yes.
Can you hear me? All right. Well, thank you for having us, and thank you for the Dawson County Chamber and all you do to promote business and development here in Dawson County. Takes all of you working together as a community and partnering with us at the state to make this community the success that it is. You know, I had the pleasure and was blessed to grow up in Dawson County. My family's been here for many generations, and I've been able to see a lot of change in our community over the past, over my lifetime. And most of it's been positive, and a lot of those things that's been positive is being able to get to see a lot of great individuals that's moved into our community, that's jumped in and participates to make our community and our home better each and every day. We had a very successful legislative session this year, and they asked me to come talk a little bit about some of the highlights, and I want to do that. And I'm going to try to steer away from some things I think Senator Gooch may want to talk about, and Speaker Ralston, because we were all there together. We all have a great relationship, and that's one of the things that you can be blessed and happy with in Dawson County is Steve is a great partner over in the Senate. He and I work very closely together. He's the majority whip over in the Senate, which puts him in a very good position, influential position in the Senate. He also is on the Rules Committee, and he's been a great help to me as I've worked over the past 3 sessions trying to move bills, because sometimes a lot of representatives and senators forget you don't only have to get them out of your House or out of your Senate, but you've also got to get them out of the other chamber and across the governor's desk. And Steve and I have got a great relationship. One of the other things that we can be extremely happy about in Dawson County is Speaker David Ralston represents the northern part of our county. There's not too many people in our state that can say they have the Speaker of the House as their state representative. It's an extremely important position. He does an amazing job keeping all of us House members in line and keeping everything moving forward. And he's a great asset to Dawson County, and I appreciate his leadership that he brings to both the House, to this community, and the state as a whole. And he's also recognized nationally as a leader. So we're very blessed to have him representing part of Dawson County. One of the things that we say every time we talk is we have one priority that we have to accomplish constitutionally every year during the legislative session, and that's pass a balanced budget. We did that again this year, and I don't know if they've actually had the opportunity to go all the way back in history, but there's a belief that it was the earliest it has ever been accomplished in our state's history. I believe we did it on day 37, and that's extremely unusual to get a budget completely passed and sent to the governor by that time frame. So we're very happy with the cooperation that the House received from the Senate and working with the governor's office. I want to talk about 3 or 4 bills that I personally worked on this year, and as we go into the panel section, I'll be happy to answer questions on any of the legislation. One of the things that was extremely important to me is education. My wife is an elementary school teacher. All of my children are in public education here in Dawson County, and we're blessed in the district that I represent, Dawson, Lumpkin, and Forsyth, to have some very high-performing schools. But we all know that there are school systems in our state that are not as fortunate. They're low-performing, and we have children that are struggling in those school systems. One of the things that the General Assembly did a couple of years ago is started talking about the Opportunity School District. That was placed on the ballot. It was not very popular with the voters. It was defeated. All the main education groups, School Board Association, Superintendent Association, PAGE, Georgia Educators, all came out in opposition to the Opportunity School District. As that debate was taking place, I was listening to those negative comments and realizing we had to do something for these low-performing schools, but this was probably not going to be the answer. So one of the other things that I'm fortunate here in Dawson County to have is someone like Damon Gibbs, who's a superintendent, who also serves on the executive board with the School Superintendent Association, and then Will Wade, who's one of your board members here in Dawson County, is the current president of the School Board Association for the state. So I reached out to both of them and other leaders across the state and said, we've got to put together a plan to help low-performing schools that we can all buy into, that we can all be a part of. So we started working last year on that effort. And as a result of that, we passed House Bill 338, which I authored, working very closely with our counterparts over in the Senate and with the governor's office, and with the School Board Association, superintendents, and others. And it got strong bipartisan support both in the House and Senate. It passed, and it's been signed into law at a press conference that the governor had recently. We're looking forward to seeing that go into action. I can tell you that as hard as all of these organizations worked against the Opportunity School District, they took a neutral stance on the legislation that I had. But anyone who's been around public education knows if you can get those education community groups to take a neutral stance, that's a huge victory because they have a very diverse membership, and it's very difficult for them to completely get behind an effort. But they were at the table every step of the way. And I'm also glad to say they stood behind the governor as he signed the legislation, and they're committed to making it successful. So from a personal standpoint, that was one of those things I'm most proud of during this legislative session. I said all along, nothing that we can do will have a greater impact on the future of our state than finding ways to help low-performing schools and improve public education in our state. So I'm thankful we were able to do that. One of the other areas that I've been working on for some time that I think is extremely important was House Bill 249. That's the opioid issue you hear a lot about. This is an epidemic that's sweeping across our country. Georgia is not immune from this. You saw a lot of news reports about the deadly triangle in the Sandy Springs, Buckhead, Roswell, Alfred area, South Forsyth. They're having numerous overdoses from heroin and opioids. Fentanyl, all the other things associated with heroin and opioids. It's an epidemic. So one of the things that I started working on about a year ago is the U.S. Attorney out of Atlanta put together a heroin task force group. It's made up of medical examiners, made up of law enforcement, both federal and state and local, and advocacy groups from all across the metro Atlanta area. I started attending their meetings saying, what can we do as a state from a policy perspective, from a law perspective, to help you, to help this issue that's happening in our state. And we started developing some ideas from those conversations. And that's one of the things that I think makes very successful legislation is when we work together with people who do it every day and understand the process, and we take input from the bottom up and create good legislation. So we came up with House Bill 249. One of the things that we saw work in other states is when you require doctors to check the database before they prescribe an opioid. Currently in Georgia, we have a prescription monitoring database system, but doctors are not required to check that. Under this legislation, they will be under certain circumstances. The bill also does quite a few other things, but it's the governor signed this legislation also at a press conference last week, and we're excited to see that go into law, and we feel very confident that this is going to have a positive impact in our state. One of the other things that I enjoy doing in the General Assembly is being able to chair the Transportation Committee. This was my first session having that opportunity, and I appreciate the confidence in the speakers here now that he placed in me, and the Committee on Assignments placed in me and putting me in that position. But I can tell you that's a big undertaking in our state. I had the opportunity to take the Transportation Committee just this week on Tuesday, and we visited the I-85 bridge and went out on the side, under the bridge, and on the bridge to see the progress that's being made. And I can tell you, Russell McMurray and the staff over at GDOT has done a tremendous job with that project. As their bridge engineers were designing a beam, they were handing it off to the contractor that was going off and building that beam. And that they worked 24 hours a day, not just the contractor, but the state employees with GDOT worked 24 hours a day on that project. That project will open Monday. One section will probably actually open this weekend, and we are hopeful that next Thursday we'll be able to have an official reopening of that I-85 intersection. But thank you, but that's a huge accomplishment. So, and GDOT has worked hard, but also our contractor with CW. And I will tell you, from meeting with those employees on the ground working for CW Matthews under the bridge, just the average employee, there was a sense of camaraderie and that they were doing something bigger than themselves. It was amazing to see the commitment that the employees had in getting that bridge reopened. One of the other things I want to mention, and I will sit down, is one of the things that we did in the House this year is we created the House Transit for Funding and Governance Commission. This is an important next lift, I think, in transportation. The Speaker and Senator Gooch and Jay Roberts, who's no longer a member of our House, he now is in the Department of Transportation. A few years ago, we passed House Bill 170. And that was to raise the funds necessary to improve highway and bridge construction and improvement and maintenance in our state. And we're bringing in around $900 million in extra revenue a year as a result of that. That's why when you drive across our state, you're seeing actual road construction for the first time in many years take place. And it's because of the bold leadership of people in our state and the leadership that we had getting that accomplished that that's actually occurring. The next issue that we've got to face, though, is we cannot continue to build more lanes. We cannot continue to just pave our way to improving traffic congestion in the Atlanta metro area. We have to look at mass transportation. We have to look at transit. We have to look at bus, rail, light rail, heavy rail. The next lift, partnering with Uber and Lyft and all the other private services. So I'm thankful for the leadership we had in the House this year in creating that. We're going to be partnering with the Senate as we move forward on that effort. But that's the next big issue that we've got to cross and face in our state is how are we going to create a regional structure for providing transit service. And we're going to be working on that. And I think the Speaker will be appointing that commission here over the next couple of weeks, and we'll get started and rolling up our sleeves and going to work and hopefully providing some real suggestions back to the Speaker and to the General Assembly next legislative session how we move forward. So with that, I will stop, and I believe I'll be turning it over to Christy for the next introduction.
How blessed we really are with our leadership here. And now we have with us Speaker Ralston, who many of you know he's related to a number of people around here, and he was born in LJ, where he graduated from Gilmer County High School, and he went on to attend Young Harris College and North Georgia College and State University, which I was remiss to mention earlier. We have President Dr. Benita Jacobs with us, so it must be great to see a few of your graduates up here doing so well. He later received his law degree from the University of Georgia School of Law, Go Dogs, And in 1992, Ralston was elected to the Georgia State Senate and served until 1998 when he won the Republican nomination for Attorney General. And in 2002, Ralston was elected to the Georgia House of Representatives, and today he represents the 7th District, which includes Fannin and Gilmer counties and a portion of our county here in Dawson. And in 2010, he was elected as Speaker, the 73rd Speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives, and he is a member of the Executive Committee of both the National Speakers Conference and the Southern Legislative Conference. And Ralston was named the 2010 Georgian of the Year by Georgia Trend magazine. And in 2011, Governing Magazine named him as one of the 16 Republican legislators in the nation to watch. So join me today in welcoming Speaker Ralston.
Well, thank you very much, Christy, and thank you all for the very kind invitation to be here today. After listening to Kevin's presentation, I hope we're all not going to be talking about the same thing. We may. Thank you for the invitation and for your hospitality to be here today. And it's always great to be here with this group and gives me an opportunity to say thank you for allowing me to represent a part of this county in the House of Representatives. It's a great pleasure to be here with House Transportation Chairman Kevin Tanner and Senate Majority Whip Steve Gooch. I actually came over here to see if you were going to make an announcement today. I didn't hear you. I do appreciate their friendship and the work they do on behalf of Dawson County, and I think we make a pretty good team working together for the county down there. You know, the timing of today's event to report on the legislative session really couldn't be better. While the session ended on March the 30th, not until this past Tuesday did the veto period end. That was the period of time that Governor Deal had to sign into law or veto the measures that had passed. So now the dust has settled, and we know what measures will become law that we passed. This session, like most, had its ups and downs, but at the end of the day, I think there were a number of good measures that were approved. And I'm not going to go through a laundry list of everything that we passed, but I do want to focus on a few bills that I think were priority, and I think that you would have some interest in. The first of those was Senate Bill 85, which provides a new framework for Georgia's craft brewers and distillers to be able to sell their products directly to consumers from the place of production. Craft beer and spirits have come a long way from the days when certain individuals would run that product across these mountains up here. I like to tell people that my house district was the birthplace of craft spirits in Georgia. Between Gilmer and Dawson County and probably Lumpkin. But this industry today is really made up of businesses, of dozens of businesses that have put people to work. They've created jobs and have become a tourism engine in many towns across Georgia, such as right here in Dawsonville. One of the bedrock principles that I work from is that Georgia is, in fact, the best place in the nation in which to do business. And we will do everything that we can to keep it that way. I believe business means jobs, and jobs mean opportunity. And as long as I have the opportunity and honor of serving all of you, we will encourage innovation and support small businesses like our craft brewers and distillers. He may already have talked about it. That's the problem running late, is I don't know what you said. Did you say anything good about me or bad? Okay, all right. Well, he didn't mention House Bill 338. which was Chairman Tanner's education reform bill. I cannot emphasize to you enough the importance of that legislation and what it will mean for the 90,000 Georgia children who currently have to attend chronically failing schools. While Chairman Tanner may have gone into the details about the legislation with you, I want you to know the kind of courage and character it took for him to lead that fight, and I want to publicly thank you for your hard work on that, Kevin. Education is one of those topics that typical politicians could be hesitant to tackle because, frankly, it's a very intense issue and the stakes are high. But Chairman Tanner put the future of Georgia's children first, and he worked tirelessly to perfect the legislation that Governor Deal recently signed into law. As Speaker, but also as a fellow representative in Georgia, I want to thank him for his leadership on this vitally important piece of legislation. We passed another bill this session that was a cause that has been near and dear to my heart for 2 or 3 years now. And Governor Deal came to the Gilmer County Fire Department last week to sign the firefighters' health insurance bill. House Bill 146 provides insurance for certain types of cancer for our firefighters. Their jobs require working in hazardous conditions where they are frequently exposed to carcinogens and toxic fumes. Modern science has demonstrated a clear link between this type of exposure and the dramatically higher incidence of cancer among firefighters. I like to tell people that when we see a fire, we run away from it. When they see a fire, they run into it. That legislation will ensure that the state does its part to support our firefighters and their families when they suffer because of what is essentially a work-related illness. It was inspired by a story that came to me about 3 years ago from a firefighter in Gilmer County named Brian Scudder. Brian Scudder had to schedule his cancer treatments in between his shifts so that he could continue to support his family. That was the way he had to fight cancer. While Brian will never benefit from that legislation, his brothers and sisters in uniform can rest assured that we have their backs. And I'm very, very proud that we were able to get that bill across the finish line this year. And I want to also thank, I don't know if Lanier Swafford is here or not, he's on the firefighters state council. I appointed him to that 2 or 3 years ago, and he was very involved in that, and I'm indebted to him for his great work. As we look forward to the summer, and Chairman Tanner mentioned this, we have the House Commission on Transit Governance and Funding that we'll be appointing in the coming days. While that commission will do much for our state, the House has also taken a particular interest in the challenges facing Georgia's rural areas and their economies. In traveling around the state, I have seen that many of our rural areas are not enjoying the same kind of prosperity as our urban and suburban centers. There's plenty of workforce data to support this observation. We like to talk about the fact that we're 3 of the past 4 years we've been named the #1 state of the nation in which to do business. And we like to talk about the fact that we have brought in over 500,000 new private sector jobs over the past 6 years here in Georgia. We like to talk about the fact that Georgia is growing and is prospering, but we must ensure that that prosperity and the opportunities that come with it are felt in every corner of the state and in every community, urban, suburban, and rural. That's why the House adopted House Resolution 389 this past session, which creates the House Rural Development Council. This council is composed of 26 House members, including Kevin Tanner as chair of the Transportation Committee, and also 9 other committee chairs. It will be meeting in rural areas beginning later in May when they have their first meeting in Tipton, and they will meet in rural areas all across Georgia for the next year and a half to hear from local leaders, local health professionals, local educators, local government officials, and residents about the unique challenges facing rural Georgia. They'll look at ways the General Assembly can create an environment for private business to create jobs in rural Georgia. Some of the policy areas that they'll be examining include education, health care, infrastructure, which include more than transportation. It includes broadband and tax policy. I'm proud that I grew up in rural Georgia, and I'm proud to represent a mostly rural district. And I'm very, very proud to support rural Georgia. And I am very excited about this initiative and look forward to working with Chairman Terry England from Winder and Chairman Jay Powell from Camilla as we undertake that very important work. With that, let me close. I'm going to stay and listen to Senator Gooch. I have to leave a little early though, but I want to say that the work that we do under the Gold Dome is always a team effort. And while I am proud to have worked on these measures, there are 235 other members, such as Chairman Tanner and Senator Gooch, who did their part to make this session a success, and I'm honored to work with them on your behalf. But finally, let me just say that I appreciate all that you do to keep Dawson County a great place to live, to work, and to raise a family, and to have an environment that is friendly for small business. It is business and community leaders like you that are vital to making this the special community that it is. May God bless you, and may He continue to bless what I like to call the greatest state and the greatest country on the planet, the United States of America. Thank you very much.
I gave an introduction for Senator Gooch a little earlier, but I will tell y'all, I made a joke about him having to drive all over his district. If you haven't driven his district before, take a Saturday and do it, and you will really be surprised that he doesn't go through a car a year, because it is beautiful. I would argue probably one of the most beautiful districts in our state, but of course it's a lot of miles over a lot of mountain roads. But we are really grateful to have you here, so I'll turn it over to Senator Gooch.
Thank you. I do live in the prettiest part of Georgia. I think we all agree to that. We're all here for obvious reasons, but we live in a beautiful state, and North Georgia is where our home and our hearts are. And I too have 3 kids in this public school systems, and one of the reasons I stay in North Georgia is because of our educational systems in Georgia. So it's a pleasure to be your voice in Atlanta. I take that job and that responsibility very seriously, and it's a humbling responsibility to say the least. And so it's always good to come back home and get around and see everyone after session and tell you about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We try to talk about a lot of the good, but I can tell you that these 2 gentlemen do such a good job at giving you a recap that I don't have to say a whole lot. I won't do that. I won't go into details on bills, although there are hundreds of bills that are introduced each year by the House and the Senate. Luckily, they don't all pass. Only about 22 to 33% of them pass this year. Unfortunately, they're still live. They have the opportunity to get through next year if the committees do their work properly and get them to the floor and they get a successful vote. So lots of work to be done. You know, it's always good to look back at what we've done in the past and reflect on were those good decisions or bad decisions. And a lot of times you can't measure performance of government. You can't measure the outcomes of legislation, but I think the one thing that we can measure that we did a couple of years ago was House Bill 170 that Kevin mentioned earlier. That's the funding of transportation. And I've been passionate about that ever since I was Soule County Commissioner in 2000 up in Lumpkin County. But we have done amazing things in the state just in 2 short years. Everywhere you look in Georgia, you see cones and barrels. You see construction workers, you see asphalt being put down, you see road work being done, and that's because we are way behind in upgrading our infrastructure, our bridges and our roads, and yes, even public transit. So we're doing a lot of work out there. We're doing a lot of work here in Dawson County. I can a list of the things that are going on right now, and you see it because you drive to and from home every day. Roundabouts that are being built, bridges that are being replaced. Georgia 400, continuous flow interchange is going to open Monday night. People seem to be a little nervous about that, and all I tell you is just be calm. It's going to be okay. Just look out for that guy beside you that's texting on his phone when he should be paying attention to the road. That's where the real danger is. But those improvements are being made because of the leadership in the General Assembly 2 years ago. The bridge, there's couple of bridges being replaced here in Dawson County. The big bridge going to Gainesville is being improved. There's a new bridge being built there. Going down 400 into Forsyth County actually voted themselves basically a tax increase a couple of years ago because the state didn't have the resources at the time to fix the roads on 400. So that road project is nearing completion. By the end of this year, there'll be an additional southbound lane opening up. You've already seen the benefit of the northbound lane that opened earlier this year and last year. And so all of that work's being done. There's an interchange at Highway 369 and 400 that's being designed by Forsyth County, and the DOT is funding part of that project as well. That's going to be an amazing improvement. That's a very congested intersection. On south and 400 down toward the end at 285, there's a P3 project that's already under contract, being designed and built. You see the trees being taken out. Those are new lanes and new off-ramps on 285 that are being constructed. About $800 million of work just on that one interchange. It's the busiest interchange in the country today. So add all those projects up just in Forsyth, Lumpkin, and Dawson County, and you're talking about with the 285 bridge work, $1 billion to $1.2 billion just in the last 2 years that have come out of the ground. And so I can say we can measure our success from legislation, from transportation easily. And I think it was a great decision that we made 2 years ago. Some of us were challenged for that and criticized for it, but we had issues in our state with our infrastructure. We have to continue to invest in our infrastructure. That is a proper role of government. It's not necessarily to create jobs. People say, why doesn't the government do something about jobs in rural Georgia? Well, we're working on that. But it's not the role of the government to create the jobs. It's the role of the government to get the barriers of entry out of the workplace and let the private companies come and do that. So we're working on that in the House and the Senate. 2 years ago, we saw a problem in rural areas of the state dealing with internet access. We put together a joint task force between the House and the Senate. We went all over the state last summer and fall talking about internet access and broadband and bandwidth and economic development, education and healthcare. And we came back to the General Assembly this year with a final report with about 26 recommendations in that report. And that led to a piece of legislation that was drafted that I took from the report. And we came up with a bill, SB 232. It has not passed the Senate or the House yet, but it's such a complicated issue that it deserves more work. So this summer and this fall, we'll continue to work with communities like Dawsonville and others around the state and the industry people dealing with the internet services to try to find a way to incentivize these companies to come out in rural Georgia and invest in their infrastructure. That is a very critical piece of infrastructure. Used to in economic development, when I was a county commissioner, you'd get a prospect that would come to a town that might want to create a manufacturing jobs in that town. And the first questions would be, how are your schools? How close is your nearest hospital? Where's your nearest interstate? Where's your nearest airport? Do you have water? Do you have sewer? The word internet never came up. Today, one of the first questions they'll ask you is, what kind of internet service do you have? What kind of bandwidth can I expect to get? And how affordable is that? And we've come short on a lot of that in rural Georgia. We have providers all over the state. It's not just the one that we have here locally, but there's a lot of providers around the state that are not putting the millions of dollars into their infrastructure that they need to do in order to provide that service. Another problem that we hear a lot of around the state is people are paying for a service they're not getting. You may pay for a service of 10 megabits per second. If you do a speed test on your computer or your phone at home and your Wi-Fi router, you're only getting a fraction of that. People are upset about it. It was the #1 complaint that I was receiving for the last 3 or 4 years in my Senate office was from people back in the district that were upset with their internet provider. provider. So that's an issue that we've got to address. There's some things in the bill that are probably going to have to be tweaked, but I think there's an opportunity there to make a difference. One of those I think that's important in that bill is to allow the EMCs to be able to deploy internet access to their customers. There's a lot of EMCs around the state. I believe there's 27. Some of them have an interest in getting into the business. They already have the customer base, they have the infrastructure, the trucks, they have the poles, the networks there. They just need to be able to go out on those poles and attach their fiber optics and run that service to the homes. And so that's one of the things I think would make a difference in Dawson County and other parts of North Georgia. And I believe one of the questions that you provided deals with that issue. So stay tuned. That is an issue I think we can come up with some solutions to this fall, and then next year we'll hopefully pass that legislation and try to make a difference in rural Georgia. I hear it from a lot of employers. Everywhere I go in my district, they're saying we need more employees. We can't find help. Not only do they have internet issues, but they have workforce issues. They're looking for 5, 10, 20 employees. They need them to come to work today. The workforce seems to be busy. The unemployment numbers are at an all-time low again in parts of North Georgia. In fact, in Forsyth County last week, I saw that unemployment was less than 4%. It was around 3.8, 3.9%. When you have a 4.1% unemployment rate like we do in Dawson or Lumpkin County, the workforce is basically fully employed. A lot of these employers are saying we need help to find employees. And so what kind of criteria do you have? A lot of them say we just need them to show up on time and be able to pass a drug test. So the bar is pretty low, but there's a shortage of workers out there. Now, at the same time I say that, over 50% of the people that live in my home county commute out of town every day for work. So we've got to find a way to incentivize those companies to move to rural Georgia. The speaker was right. The city of Atlanta is doing well. With all the big jobs and the big job announcements that you read about in the news, they're coming. They're coming to Georgia. Unfortunately, they think that Atlanta is Georgia, and it's not. We've got to get them introduced to the other parts of the state. Get them up here and let them taste a little bit of that moonshine. I think they want to go back home, speaker. I think they want to go back north. So we've got to get them into rural Georgia. We've got to invest in our infrastructure. Education is already good here. We've got to let them know that, and we've got to tell the story. And I think this commission that the speaker has created is a great first step. And the Senate will be there to partner in any way we can on that. So the economy is good, as y'all see on the news. We're back growing. The state budget hit almost $25 billion this year. 6 years ago when I went to the Senate, it was $16 billion. It's amazing how much more fun it is to be in the General Assembly when there's a growing economy, not a shrinking economy. These guys did the hard work when they had to cut it 25% before we got there. Kevin and I were lucky we came as it came back up. So we've got to make sure that that continues to grow. We've got to continue to adopt good tax reform measures that will bring those companies into Georgia. And I think the governor has done a great job. Governor Deal will be leaving office next year, so look out. Campaign signs will start popping up everywhere. Next year's an election year. Who knows what happens? But I'm excited to be a part of this team, and I look forward to continuing to work with these two gentlemen next year. And anything we can do to help you, we're here to do that. Give us a call or email, and we can be here in just a few minutes. So I think time's up, so we're going to stop and go to the questions. So thank you, Kristen.
We're not going to be too formal, but we do have a few questions that we're going to speak about for just a minute. But first, we understand that legislation was passed during this last session that will allow counties to levy an individual transportation special purpose local option sales tax. We know that is lost. And can you explain how that legislation works and what you envision the potential impact would be on North Georgia? Because we'll be honest, anyone I've mentioned it to, no one heard that happened. So we're informal, so y'all pass it back.
Yes, I think both of us can take the question. If you go back a few years, you'll remember the regional SPLOST that was introduced on the ballot. It failed just about everywhere in Georgia except for 3 districts, 3 regions. We're in is part of the Northeast Georgia Mountain Regional Commission, which is the hub is in Gainesville. All those counties and cities proposed letting, I guess trust would be a proper word. There was a lot of issues with trust that they felt like their money would be sent to Gainesville or to Forsyth County or even to Atlanta and not be spent there locally. So the idea behind the bill, it's a Senate bill, was to allow these counties to levy their own 1% sales tax to do projects in their counties. And if they wanted to partner with another county, they could. They'd have to identify those projects and then go to a referendum to allow the citizens to vote. This year we passed another bill that sort of supplements that language that says you can break those 1% sales tax into referendums into smaller pieces, but not the total, the aggregate of them could not exceed 1%. So you may have a city or a county that wanted to build an interchange like Forsyth County did, and you wouldn't need a full 1% sales tax to fund that one project, but you could have 1/4% or 1/3 of 1% sales tax for a specific project. You may want to build a 4-lane across part of Dawson County, so you can levy a fraction of 1% for that specific project. Then next year you can come back and come up with another project. So it just gives the counties more flexibility with cities to do more locally with local control. It doesn't exceed the cap. I think you have an 8% cap on sales tax. We've got to be careful not to continue to grab more and more sales tax and raise the sales tax, because I feel like someday if we're ever going to get rid of the income tax in Georgia, you've got to use that sales tax in order to offset the loss of your income tax, and that's a different discussion for a different day.
One I bet a lot of people in this room would like to have. We are hearing from many of our members that one of the major obstacles, and I believe both of you mentioned, the obstacles to having a fully employed workforce. We have low unemployment rates, but every business around here, probably many of you in this room, are currently hiring. And one thing we're just hearing over and over again is people can't pass a drug test. And I'll be honest, this is not stereotypes. This isn't young people. It's people of all ages, all backgrounds. We are seeing it, and I'm not hating on Dawson County, everybody is seeing it, particularly in rural Georgia. You could speak a little bit, I know you spoke a little bit to your opioid legislation, but if you could speak to what you could see coming down the line, or if there is anything that you can do legislatively to help this issue, because it's definitely a crisis.
Well, there's some issues that we face that really don't have a good quick answer, and this is one of them. One of the problems we have in North Georgia, and Steve hit on it, we basically have no unemployment. If you want a job, you can go get a job in today's market. One of the problems that we also face, and especially for Forsyth County where I represent, there's not a whole lot of affordable housing, and a lot of the jobs that are coming in are jobs relating to the commercial industry, the grocery stores, food locations. Those folks have to have somewhere to live, and a lot of the growth that we're experiencing on the residential side are $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 homes in those areas, and not everyone's going to be able to afford those houses. And a lot of the jobs that we're attracting to a lot of these locations, quite frankly, just don't pay enough to live in that type of environment. So it makes it very difficult to bring in the workforce that we need. From a drug perspective, one of the things I encourage you as a community to do, because this is a community issue, there's not anything that I know of we can pass in legislation to fix the drug problem. The opioid issue is a major issue, and we're going to do things to make it more and more difficult for people to get opioids, to get addicted to opioids. One of the things the legislation has in there is when doctors prescribe an opioid, they have to give the patient information. This is an addictive product. Here's the signs to look for. If you experience these signs, here's what you need to do. When you're done with the medication, if it's not all gone, here's how you dispose of it properly. Other things are relating to that to try to address the area. One of the things I encourage you to do, and Forsyth County's got a heroin task force and a drug task force that they're working with as a community effort to try to bring all the partners together, from county commission, other leaders, city leaders, but also advocacy groups, private individuals together to start talking about this. Too many times we don't want to talk about drug problems. We don't want to admit we have a drug issue, but all of our communities do have that. As far as passing the drug test, I'm a light commercial contractor. I build primarily residential construction. It's a huge issue in our industry. I can tell you every subcontractor I use today is looking for employees, every one of them. They're looking for employees who can pass a drug test and can show up on time to give them 8 hours of work, and they just can't find them. That's a tough issue, and I don't have the answer to that. And I don't think any of us do politically, other than as a community, we need to continue to work together to try to find those solutions. Work with our local school systems, work with our young people, family connections, and others to get to these young people at an early age. So I know that's not answering the question, but there's really not an easy answer.
Absolutely, and just so that if there's anyone in this room that's a particular passion about combating the drug issues, or knows people who've been through the addiction cycle, we are actually beginning a drug task force here in Dawson County. Nancy Stites from Family Connection is heading that up. So if that is something we're looking for people passionate about the issue, if it's really affecting you, you can let me know or Nancy know, because like Kevin mentioned, it takes a whole village.
Yeah, and let me just add one other thing. One of the things that we have done at the state over the past few years with criminal justice reform is we have taken steps to make it easier for these individuals when they come out of the prison system to find employment. One of the things that we're doing is, in the past, you went to prison, you stayed in a cell, they open the door, it's time for you to go out, that's it. Now we're using transition centers where we're transitioning people back into society. Just over the past several years, we've started providing GED training in the prison system. That's never been done before in the state. But not only are we providing GED training, but we're providing technical college training in the prison system, where these people are coming out with a technical degree where they can get a job. They're going to transition centers where they stay in jail at night. They go out to work during the day. There's financial counselors working with them, teaching them how to balance a checkbook, how to open an account, helping them find a car to drive, helping them get their driver's license back, getting them back into society. All of those things are important. One of the other things that we see with drug addiction is a lot of times there's an underlying mental health issue, and people are self-medicating themselves because of an underlying mental health issue. Mental health illness in this country is a huge problem that, again, it's not got an easy answer, but it's something we're going to have to work on. I had a gentleman, real quick, that rented one of my rental houses recently for 2.5 years that was in mental health court. He came off his medication and quit paying his rent, so when I had him removed, he had actually set a campfire in my living room floor, burned my stove, all my cabinets up, ripped out all my lights, ripped out the electrical outlets. After he was removed, he slept in the yard for 2 days on a mattress until he set it on fire. But that, as bad as that sounds, the guy has an illness. If he's on his medication, he functions in society perfectly normal. When he came off his medication, he started self-medicating with illegal drugs. And a lot of the people we have today that are using these drugs have an underlying mental health issue. So there are things that we can do, there are things that we have done, but we've got to continue to do more. And it's not just something we can do in Atlanta, it's a community effort.
Thank you. Switching gears to education, most of us are familiar with the current QBE formula that funds education. That was created in 1986. Superintendent Gibbs has spoken to our members about it in the past, and we were just kind of wondering if you see any changes to this formula that was first implemented back in 1986. We know there's a coalition that's coming together to bring recommendations to you, but we're, of course, one of the donor counties, and we know there's no easy fix to this one either, but I wanted to pass that over to y'all.
This is something we both may want to mention, but I serve on the Education Committee. I'm also on the Appropriations Committee, and on the subcommittee in Appropriations are K-12 education funding. So all the funding that comes through the state going to our local schools comes through our subcommittee. The governor had taken on the goal of being able to completely revamp QBE funding. It is outdated. A lot of folks in donor counties like Dawson don't like the fact that we send 4 meals outside Dawson County of our tax dollars to other communities. The problem when redoing QBE funding is it's a huge task, and it's going to be very politically charged because there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. Quite frankly, one of the things that you'll probably see happen if we do go down that path is weighting poverty, because In some of these communities that have a very low socioeconomic status, they may be weighted more heavily, which means they may get more funding. If Steve and I's communities in a new QBE funding or whatever it was called was going to lose money, that we're going to hear from Damon and our leaders to be against that. So it's going to be very difficult to pass changes to how our QBE funding is done in our state. I don't anticipate that Governor Deal, and I can't speak for Governor Deal, but next year's his last year in office. We had anticipated he was going to bring forward a proposal this year to change how education was funded. All the way up right to the beginning of the legislative session, his staff was working on that with the State Department of Education. They just could not get something that they felt like they could get done, so that didn't come into the General Assembly this year. I seriously doubt if he's going to try to take that on in his last year in office. So I don't anticipate that changing in the next couple of years. We get a new governor in office, new lieutenant governor and others, we may see some movement in that area, but it's going to be a huge challenge.
Kevin covered it really well. You know, there's rural counties in Georgia smaller than some subdivisions in North Georgia. I mean, you've got counties that 5,000 people in an entire county. They have no tax base whatsoever. You think about what's going on out here on Georgia 400 with all that retail and that shopping and the restaurants, which I spend a lot of my money here, by the way. You're capitalizing on that. Those counties in other parts of the state, they don't have any business at all to speak of. The ones who have interstates coming through the towns have a couple of gas stations and, you know, a couple of Longhorns or Ruby Tuesdays, and then that's it. So those counties, if you got rid of the QBE formula the way it's written today and did nothing, you would shut down a lot of those schools because the tax base doesn't support it through ad valorem taxes. So we've got to come up with a better system, but it's so political down here. Just like if we lower what we keep here locally and send it to South Georgia, a lot of you would question, why are you down here? You're not representing our needs. But we have to pull this state together as a whole and lift the entire state up as a whole. It's just like the analogy of the strength of the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so we've got to help those counties that are poor. We've got to help those failing school systems out there that are poor, and those kids that are in poverty, they don't have anybody there to help them at home. So this is going to be a challenge. I don't think you'll see it next year because it's already, the politics have already started with the governor's race. And so I think to make a good, sound policy decision, you need to get as much of the politics out of it. Hopefully 2019 and 20 will be when we will see that action. But it is a challenge, and I hear it from everywhere in my district. They're like, why do we send our money to Atlanta just to redistribute it to other parts of the state? So it's going to be tough, but we've got to roll our sleeves up and make the right decision, and that's going to be the challenge for us.
I think we're all glad that that's not our job to make those decisions. We're glad that y'all get to take that for us. But kind of speaking to that issue, a proposal that Chamber has been behind for many years, and I know a lot of our local citizens and members have been behind, is allowing citizens of a county or municipality to authorize the flexible usage of SPLOST or education SPLOST. So our leaders would be able to pick it, our citizens would be able to allow that to go towards funding operations instead of just funding bricks and mortar, because y'all have driven around recently, we have some pretty beautiful schools, but we'd love to be able to pay for some of the programs inside them, not just the beautiful buildings with eSPLOST. So in counties like Dawson, where the sales tax base is larger than our property tax base, we really believe that flexibility would be very beneficial. And coming from one of the counties that you were just describing, we literally had to go to Alabama to go to Walmart. That's not a joke. I know that this situation is pretty specific, and there aren't a lot of counties in Georgia that really fall under it, but for us, we see it's really beneficial. Do you think there's any movement on this, any possibility coming down the line?
There has been legislation introduced in the past that would do that. It's something I personally support under the right conditions. It would require a constitutional change, so it would require 2/3 of the vote of the House and Senate, and then it would have to go out to you all to vote on. So it's a heavy lift. It's not something that we can just pass with a simple majority and make that change. It's a constitutional issue. One of the things, and my personal thoughts on this would be, is like Christy said, a county like Dawson could benefit from that. When we're in a mode where we're not having to build new buildings and new schools, and we're not in a growth mode, then operational issues become a problem like they were a few years ago. One of the proposals that's been thrown out there, which I tend to agree with, is having a specific amount of that education splash can be used for operational costs, whether it's 25%, whatever that number is. And of course, ultimately, the voters would approve that, because when the Board of Education developed their ELAs, they would have to put that out on the referendum to say 25% of this ELAs will go to general operation cost. And in the legislation, we had talked about, in enabling legislation, developing that ELA's constitutional amendment would be to limit the types of operational costs that can go toward. So there's a lot of conversation around that. There are, at one point when we first started moving in that direction, the School Board Association and the Superintendent Association were actually opposed to that, and that was the reason we couldn't get movement. But I think through the efforts of some of our leaders here locally, there may be some movement in the direction of getting them on board. But I think if we could get our Superintendent Association and our School Board Association at the state level to support that effort, you would see a lot easier time under the Gold Dome to actually make that happen. But again, a lot of our communities, it would not be a benefit to them, but for Dawson County, probably for South County, it could be a huge benefit.
You know, I used to be a hard no on that issue because I was afraid that the monies would just be spent and the size of the school systems would expand and you wouldn't really improve, you wouldn't see improvements in education. But on the other hand, I've seen counties that have a lot of sales tax revenues. They can only use that money for brick and mortar, so they build these beautiful performing arts centers, and they have these gorgeous ball fields with turf. I mean, you go down to Forsyth County, just about every new park they're building in there has artificial turf. You go to other parts of my district, we don't even have textbooks in our schools. My kid right now has a 20-year-old social studies book because the school isn't buying textbooks. So if we have to quit building nice new buildings and tennis courts in order to put textbooks in my son's classroom, I'm for it. So whatever we need to do to help educate our children to learn academics, I think should be our first priority. And this issue probably needs to be put into this task force on looking at QBE and the school formula and say, what can we do differently? Almost we need to just throw out everything we've always done and start over. So I'm willing to listen to anybody's ideas, but there's areas of the state that I think we could definitely benefit from being able to use those funds. And so I'm all ears.
Thank you for that. We're about out of time, but I think I'd be tarred and feathered if I didn't mention what our number one issue is, which you've kind of already addressed, but of course it's access to necessary broadband. And as you mentioned, and we've heard from many speakers about economic development, if you're looking for those high-paying technology jobs, you've got to have the access to support it. And I know Joel is from Congressman Collins' office here, and he hears it every day as well as these gentlemen up here. So we're all on the same page there. But do you have a timeline that you think, the EMC idea would really benefit Dawsonville? Do you have any, thoughts? Give us some hope here.
If we could get the industry folks that are opposed, now the industry people will tell you, and if anybody here works for one of them, stand up and argue with me if you wish. They'll tell you they don't mind competition, but I can tell you from being down there this year, they mind competition. They don't want it. Some of the industry guys do not want the EMCs to get in the business because they're afraid they're going to move in their territory and start competing. Well, I say, bring it on. 2 gas stations at one corner is better than one because they're going to compete on price. And so if we have some competition in the marketplace, it's good for the consumer, in my opinion. When you've got Kroger and Publix across the road from each other, I guarantee you somebody's over in the other guy's store every week looking at prices. They want to know what's going on. They want to get to that customer. So bring competition into the marketplace. North Georgia Network's already done some good things here in Dawson County. The problem is they can't get to the home with that network without more money. So part of the bill that we started out with this year talks about funding through the Universal Access Funds for Georgia. Every month, when you open your Windstream telephone bill, you pay a Universal Access Fund fee. You pay it for the federal and the state My bill that I've been working on with the committee, and Kevin was on this committee, we went around the state last year. This bill will allow us to repurpose that universal access fund to be able to deploy broadband out into rural areas like Windstream and whomever, opportunity to go and compete for those funds through the PSC. The Public Service Commission would regulate how those monies would be distributed. It would be based on needs. It would go to communities with the areas that need it the most, and that's our rural parts of the state. So there's a great opportunity there. We've got to get our citizens in behind us on this initiative. There's a lot of lobbyists in that building, and they're fighting for their special needs. Nobody's in there fighting for the consumers except me and Kevin. That's your representative in the Capitol. So we're going to keep working on it. We're not going to give up. I really believe next year we'll be able to make it happen. We've already seen 1 or 2 governor's candidates mention in their platform for why they're running for governor. They want to help rural areas. They want to help get broadband. So I really believe our time has come to see a change, but it's going to take time. It doesn't happen quickly. But we've got to get the attitudes and the mindsets of the elected officials to focus on what's important out in rural Georgia. And that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest. The other would be rural health care. That is a tremendous problem. We won't talk about it anymore today, but we've got to work on that as well. We can't keep sending everybody to Atlanta hospitals or Northeast Georgia. We've got to keep our small hospitals open. So broadband and health care.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of little things to that. And I appreciate Steve's leadership in this area too. He took this bull by the horns. He and I share a lot of the same area, and that is our #1 complaint we get from constituents. And also our federal delegation here in Georgia, Senator Isaacson and the other members of the delegation have written a letter to the FCC asking them to do whatever it takes to be able to open up competition in rural Georgia and other places in this country. It's important because currently the internet's not regulated, so there's not a bill we can introduce to allow another company to come in to Dawson County and compete. Any company can come in today and compete with Windstream. The problem is the expense of running the infrastructure. Like Steve said, if we can change legislation to allow Amical EMC or Sony EMC or Habersham EMC to be able to run that fiber on their lines and be able to get in the business. They have so much of the infrastructure already in place today. They can get in the business and make a good business model to be successful. But just like the craft brewery issue, I introduced legislation several years ago that would allow our local distillery to sell their product. It was met by strong lobbyists on the other side, completely opposed to the issue of never happen, you're not going to break the 3-tier system. This year, it took about 3 years, but this year we broke through that wall and we made it happen. And like Steve said, those of you don't have to lobby Steve and I. Steve and I are ready to do whatever it takes to increase competition in the broadband area here in this area. But if you have influence over other representatives and other senators across the state, I encourage you to exercise that, because the people who are in the Atlanta area, the committee was co-chaired by Don Parsons, who's in the House. He's from the Cobb County area. They don't have a broadband issue where he lives, so this was news to him. And I will tell you, Steve and I even had some eye-opening experiences when we went to some of these communities across the state, specifically South Georgia. They basically had no broadband service at all. Dawson County's broadband service was exceptional compared to some of the parts of our state. They cannot continue to grow, and we cannot help rural Georgia until we get them broadband access. So I know it's a priority for both of us, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to make it happen.
I think that's news to all of our ears, right? Let's give them a round of applause. We're taking on so many difficult issues. I will say, they're all very complex, but it's almost a joy to be in a place to be able to deal with these complex issues, because some of the things we were talking about 5 and 10 years ago, they've either been solved, our economy has turned around and brought us out of those issues. So we're excited that y'all get to go to Atlanta instead of all of us to work on these issues, but we really appreciate your service, and as y'all can tell, we're very blessed to have people that know their districts so well down in Atlanta. So with that, thank you all for being here. Please stop by